Around the world there are millions of dollars getting taken out of their countries and being put into personal things like mansions, cars, planes, and more. Based on Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI, and global reporting trends, the CPI ranks countries by their perceived levels of public sector corruption, with 0 being highly corrupt and 100 being very clean. Number 8, Russia. 1. Power concentration. Since the early 2000s, power in Russia has been increasingly centralized around Vladimir Putin and a small group of loyal elites. This consolidation allows them to control major institutions, suppress opposition, and evade accountability, fostering an environment where corruption thrives. 2. Oligarchy and cronyism. After the fall of the Soviet Union, state assets were sold off rapidly and often unfairly, creating a powerful class of oligarchs. Many of these individuals gained wealth through connections rather than merit, and their loyalty to the Kremlin often determines their survival, not legality or transparency. 3. Weak rule of law. Russian courts and law enforcement often act in the interests of the state or influential individuals. Laws are selectively enforced, and the judiciary lacks independence, allowing corrupt officials and businesspeople to act with impunity. 4. State capture and rent-seeking. Key sectors of the economy, like energy and defense, are heavily influenced or controlled by the state. These sectors are prone to rent-seeking behavior, where officials extract personal gain from public resources, resulting in widespread graft and inefficiency. 5. Suppression of media and civil society. Independent media, NGOs, and opposition figures are often harassed, shut down, or imprisoned. Without strong civil oversight or investigative journalism, exposing and combating corruption is extremely difficult. In short, corruption in Russia is systemic, deeply embedded in its political, legal, and economic structures, sustained by a lack of checks and balances, and reinforced by authoritarian governance. Number 7, Haiti. Haiti's corruption is deeply rooted in its political instability, weak institutions, and historical governance issues. The country has long struggled with political corruption, including bribery, nepotism, and abuse of power, which disrupt efforts to establish a functioning democracy and improve the quality of life for its citizens. Several factors contribute to Haiti's corruption: political instability, frequent changes in leadership, coups, and weak governance structures have led to a lack of accountability. Gang influence. Criminal organizations operate alongside the state, often controlling large portions of the country and influencing political decisions. Historical dictatorship. The legacy of authoritarian rule, such as the Duvalier family's dictatorship, created a culture of impunity and violence. Economic hardship. Extreme poverty and lack of resources make corruption more prevalent, as officials and individuals seek personal gain. Weak judicial system. The justice system lacks the strength to prosecute corrupt officials and criminal organizations effectively. Haiti ranks among the most corrupt countries in the world, with a Transparency International score of 16 out of 100, indicating severe corruption. The ongoing crisis, fueled by gang violence and political instability, continues to hinder efforts to establish a stable and transparent government. Number 6, Sudan. Sudan's corruption is deeply tied to its political instability, military dominance, and economic mismanagement. The country has long been ruled by authoritarian regimes that prioritize personal enrichment over governance, leading to widespread financial and political corruption. Key factors contributing to Sudan's corruption include military control. The Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, dominate the economy, controlling industries like gold trade and telecommunications for personal profit. Weak institutions. Corruption is rampant in government sectors, with little oversight or accountability. Anti-corruption efforts are often superficial and ineffective. Kleptocracy. Former President Omar al-Bashir's regime entrenched a system where elites exploited national resources, undermining democratic institutions. Civil war and instability. Ongoing conflict fuels corruption, as military factions use state resources for personal gain rather than national development. Sudan ranks among the most corrupt nations globally, with systemic corruption preventing economic growth and democratic reforms. The lack of transparency and accountability continues to hinder efforts to stabilize the country. Number 5, Venezuela. Corruption in Venezuela is deeply entrenched and has intensified significantly over the past 2 decades, particularly under the leadership of Hugo Chavez and his successor Nicolas Maduro. The country, once one of Latin America's wealthiest due to its vast oil reserves, has seen its institutions eroded by a combination of authoritarianism, nepotism, and criminal networks. State-owned oil company PDVSA became a major hub of corruption, with billions of dollars lost to embezzlement, kickbacks, and money laundering schemes. Top military and government officials have been implicated in trafficking drugs, siphoning public funds, and using state resources for personal enrichment. Key oversight institutions like the judiciary and legislature were co-opted, removing checks on power and enabling impunity. International investigations have uncovered massive financial crimes tied to Venezuelan elites, including the Boliburguesia, a class of businessmen and politicians who grew rich under Chavismo. US and European authorities have sanctioned dozens of officials, citing human rights abuses and kleptocracy. This widespread corruption has contributed to Venezuela's economic collapse, hyperinflation, and humanitarian crisis, forcing millions to flee the country. Number 4. Zimbabwe. Corruption in Zimbabwe has been a major driver of its political and economic decline, particularly since the late 1990s. Under longtime ruler Robert Mugabe, who held power from 1980 to 2017, the state became heavily politicized, with key institutions like the police, judiciary, and military used to protect elites and suppress dissent. One of the most notorious scandals was the misuse of funds in the War Veterans Compensation Fund in the late 1990s, which drained state resources. Land reform, meant to redistribute land from white farmers to black Zimbabweans, turned into a corrupt patronage system where ruling party allies seized land without oversight or expertise, crippling agricultural output. The ruling party, ZANU-PF, became synonymous with nepotism, cronyism, and looting of public assets. State-owned enterprises like the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority, ZESA, and the Reserve Bank were riddled with corruption, including illicit foreign currency deals, smuggling, and inflated procurement contracts. Under President Emerson Mnangagwa, who took power in 2017 after Mugabe's ouster, promises of reform were made, but corruption has largely continued. High-profile figures are rarely prosecuted, and anti-corruption bodies lack independence. The misuse of COVID-19 funds and scandals involving gold smuggling, like the Gold Mafia exposé in 2023, highlight ongoing looting by politically connected elites. This entrenched corruption has deepened poverty, driven inflation, and eroded public trust, pushing many Zimbabweans into hardship or emigration. Number 3. Turkmenistan. Saparmurat Niyazov, 1991 to 2006. Niyazov, also known as Turkmenbashi, father of the Turkmen, established an extreme cult of personality. He renamed cities, streets, and even months after himself and his family. He ran the country as a total autocracy, turning the state into a personal fiefdom. Corruption was rampant. Control of natural gas revenues was fully centralized, with no transparency. Billions of dollars in gas profits were believed to be siphoned into offshore accounts. Public funds were spent lavishly on bizarre vanity projects, such as gold statues of himself and a massive, unused ice palace in the desert. No independent oversight, no freedom of the press, and no civil society allowed any accountability. Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedow, 2007 to 2022, claimed reform but quickly continued Niyazov's autocratic style, replacing his predecessor's cult with his own. He called himself the Protector, Arkadag. He and his family controlled vast parts of the economy, especially natural gas, construction, and telecommunications. His regime funneled public money into glitzy white marble cities and grandiose events while basic services like healthcare and food remained underfunded. Corruption was institutionalized. State contracts were awarded to loyalists, and bribes were common at all levels of society. In 2022, he handed power to his son Serdar, continuing a dynastic rule. Summary: both Niyazov and Berdimuhamedow ran Turkmenistan as a closed, authoritarian kleptocracy, using state resources for personal gain and prestige while repressing dissent and maintaining total control over the economy and public life. Number 2. Yemen. Yemen's corruption is deeply rooted in its political fragmentation, tribal structures, and decades of poor governance, worsened by war. 1. Long-standing patronage system. Corruption in Yemen stems from a deeply entrenched patronage system, a network of favors, bribes, and loyalty exchanges that's been in place for decades. Under former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, 1978 to 2012, power and wealth were concentrated among a small elite loyal to him. State institutions were weakened and used to reward supporters, not to serve the public. Saleh himself described ruling Yemen as like dancing on the heads of snakes, reflecting how he balanced competing tribal, political, and military interests through corruption. 2. Weak state institutions. Even before the current conflict, Yemen's institutions were fragile, poorly funded, and riddled with inefficiencies. Public sector jobs were often awarded through connections rather than merit, and many public servants didn't show up for work but still collected salaries, a system known as ghost workers. Law enforcement and the judiciary have long been subject to political interference and bribery. 3. Oil revenues and mismanagement. Like many resource-poor but oil-dependent countries, Yemen relied heavily on limited oil revenues. Rather than investing in sustainable development, much of the revenue was siphoned off by elites. Corrupt procurement practices, smuggling, and opaque financial management plagued the oil and gas sectors, preventing the wealth from reaching ordinary Yemenis. 4. War and fragmentation. Since the civil war escalated in 2015, the country has fragmented into territories controlled by different groups: Houthi rebels in the north, the internationally recognized government in the south, and others like the Southern Transitional Council. Each faction runs its own economy, tax systems, and security forces, often exploiting humanitarian aid, public funds, and smuggling networks for profit. The conflict economy has made corruption even more systemic, with aid theft, illegal taxation, and black markets flourishing. 5. Humanitarian aid exploitation. Yemen has received billions in aid due to its humanitarian crisis, but some of this aid has been diverted by corrupt actors. There have been documented cases where both government-aligned and Houthi authorities manipulated distribution lists, imposed taxes on aid deliveries, or redirected supplies to their loyalists or the black market. 6. Lack of accountability and oversight. There is virtually no functioning accountability mechanism. Whistleblowers face threats, investigative journalism is rare, and anti-corruption bodies are either powerless or co-opted. Transparency International regularly ranks Yemen among the most corrupt countries globally. Summary: Yemen's corruption is systemic and reinforced by decades of authoritarian rule, weak institutions, oil mismanagement, and now, a fractured war economy. The ongoing conflict has created a perfect storm where competing authorities profit from chaos, leaving ordinary Yemenis to suffer the consequences. Number 1. Afghanistan. Corruption in Afghanistan is a widespread and growing problem in Afghan society. Transparency International's 2024 Corruption Perceptions Index ranks the country in 162nd place out of 180 countries. The 180 countries of the index are scored on a scale from 0, highly corrupt, to 100, very clean, according to the perceived corruption in the public sector, and then ranked by their score. Afghanistan's 2024 ranking is based on a score of 17. For comparison with regional scores, the highest score among the countries of the Asia-Pacific region was 84, the average score was 44 and the lowest score was 16. In this region, only Myanmar had a lower score than Afghanistan. Afghanistan has long been at the heart of the global drug trade, primarily due to its massive production of opium, the raw material for heroin. For decades, the country has been the world's largest opium producer, supplying over 80% of global demand at its peak. The drug trade has fueled conflict, funded insurgent groups like the Taliban, and weakened state institutions. Farmers often grow opium poppies because it's more profitable than legal crops, especially in areas where government support is minimal or absent. After the Taliban regained power in 2021, they announced a ban on opium cultivation in 2022. Initial satellite imagery and reports suggested the ban was being enforced in some regions, with a significant reduction in poppy cultivation in 2023. However, this has had mixed consequences. While heroin production declined, it led to economic hardship for farmers, and there's evidence of a shift toward methamphetamine production using local ephedra plants and imported chemicals. The ongoing humanitarian crisis, lack of governance, and regional smuggling networks make long-term solutions difficult. Foreign involvement, while aimed at development and security, sometimes unintentionally fueled corruption. Billions of dollars in aid were spent quickly, with limited accountability. Contractors and officials siphoned off large portions of funds intended for rebuilding infrastructure or improving services. In some cases, even Taliban insurgents profited from foreign projects through extortion or protection fees. After the Taliban returned to power in 2021, they claimed to be cracking down on corruption, and some reports suggest a decrease in petty bribery. However, there are serious concerns about transparency under their regime, with corruption now taking new forms, hidden from public scrutiny. In short, Afghanistan's corruption is not just a side effect of conflict. It has been a central feature of how power has operated, undermining development, trust in government, and long-term stability.